What's up, brothers? Hope everyone's doing well out there. So, embrace mediocrity. That's not advice, it's a concept. It's an abstraction, if you will. Embrace mediocrity. All right. Relax and enjoy mediocrity, you could say. The reason why I want to talk about this subject is because if you were born relatively close to when I was born, if you're a millennial, the world that we were born and raised in no longer exists. Think about that for a second. No other generation can really say that. But the world that we were born and raised in no longer exists. The education we received is practically pointless, and the tools that we were given to succeed are obsolete. They're no longer useful. The women of our generation value experience and travel over family and love. The men of our generation value wisdom over accomplishments. I can distinctively remember as a kid seeing Gen Xers, one generation above us. The men were very focused on accomplishments, even if it were buying a nice car. They always had a nice car with nice rims on it, nice sound system. They were very braggadocious, very proud. They were individuals. It was this individualism version of success, right? But they did that, and the women of their generation were they were looking to shack up, get knocked up, and start families. That's what they wanted. And even more so with boomers. 90% of our parents' generation, the boomers, got married, had kids, and had a nuclear family. A lot of them divorced, but at least they accomplished it, But the millennial generation, not so much. And Gen Z, totally cooked. And let's be honest. They were cooked from the get-go. But as a millennial, think about it. Nobody chose to be a millennial, or a Gen Z for that matter. Nobody said, in the timeline of human history, we want to exist when, just throw us out there in the time period when everything we learn in our childhood, everything we experience in our teenage years will just disappear by the time we're 25. The whole world will just change. We'll watch it all crumble down. Everything we used to see, everything that we saw as normal when we were young is just going to disappear. And all of the things that were a given in our parents' generation, like finding a good job, getting married, buying a house, having 2 children, those are all the things that are necessary for a nuclear family. If you want to say that you're the leader of the nuclear family, you have to accomplish all those things, all of them. And in their generation, it was a given. 90% of them did it. They would say things like, don't worry, you'll meet your person. Don't worry, it'll happen for you. Just be patient. And it did happen for them. But with millennials, it's not happening. Some people are accomplishing some of these, one of these or 2 of these, but not all of them. 50% of millennials, something like that, own homes. 50%, something like that, have kids. 50%, something like that. It's roughly 50% get married, but 50% get divorced. So when you crunch out all the numbers, what percent of millennials at the age of 35 actually are leading a nuclear family? Small percentage, 15% max. I know some people might think it's higher than that. You might think, well, it can't be that low, but it is that low. If you look at the numbers, you look at the statistics. It's crazy. What inspired me to make this video was today I went into this, it's a store called Brahms. if you've ever heard of it, you'll probably know it as a fast food chain in Texas and Oklahoma and some surrounding states. But really, it's a farm. It's a family-owned farm, and they started a fast food chain as well, but they sell groceries. You know, they have a dairy farm. They have beef, they have chicken, they have eggs, they have all kinds of vegetables. Fresh, clean food. Totally pointless, but I just want to give you a backstory of the place I was walking into. So I walk in to get groceries. You know, I like to eat clean, fresh groceries, not like junk that they have at the superstores, but I go in there and I set my groceries down on the conveyor, and it's going down it, and there's a cashier standing there. He's 31 years old, roughly, I'm guessing. And as my groceries are coming towards him, he starts doing this, as if he's like pulling the groceries to him, like a magic trick. And, you know, instantly you kind of realize, okay, if he's 31, he's a cashier for a living, kind of goofy dude, and he does little kid shit like that, you know, you're dealing with like a playful, childlike individual. If you want to be rude about it, you could say an inkwell. Modern people would call him an inkwell. You know, probably a guy that's never going to exceed $40,000 a year in his life. Probably lives with his parents. Will probably never have a girlfriend. You know, so we joked around and talked for a minute. He's a cool guy. I like people like that. I enjoy those types of people. You know, he cracked a joke. He told me, anybody ever told you you look like a cheap version of Ryan Reynolds? I was like, you know what? I hear that all the time, actually. So I just joked back with him. Yeah, my parents tried to buy Ryan Reynolds, but they couldn't afford him, and they saw me sitting on the bottom shelf, so they went ahead and picked me up. And he's like, you know, we joked for a minute, little dumb jokes, right? And as I walked out, I just thought, the only thing that guy's really guilty of is lucking out on the timeline. I know some of you will say, well, he could have chose to go to college and have a career and blah, 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 and maybe lift weights and improve himself, change his life around. I don't see it that way. I think that is who he is fundamentally. He is a goofy, you know, kind of dorky kind of guy. Like in the movie Dazed and Confused, you know, you have the jocks, you have the nerds. You know, he's on the nerd side, right? That's just what he is. But not like a bookworm nerd, like a personality type of a nerd. Had he been born, on the timeline, had he been born 20 years earlier than he was actually born, he would probably have a better job. He would probably have a wife. He would have a couple of kids. He would probably own a home. But instead, he was born in 1993. So he's living a life as a cashier with no girlfriend, you know, no home, probably lives with his parents. And that's his life. But he's accepted it, and he's okay with it. So in my book, that makes him a solid guy. You know, I think when you speak to somebody like that, and he's still joking and enjoying life, even though, like, he is the ultimate victim of the decline that everyone talks about. He's experiencing it firsthand, suffering from it, doesn't even care. That's a solid dude right there. Like, if I were to ever take my camera out and go out in public and just, like, you know, record random shit, that's the type of person that I would want in my videos. That's star power right there, right? That's mediocrity at its finest. That's what the people love. That's what the people want to see. It's real, it's raw. You know, but in my generation, these guys value wisdom over accomplishments. You know, so this guy is probably, like, he's probably well rehearsed on a lot of things. He's probably educated himself on many things. But men of my generation will educate themselves on female nature, which makes them not even want to play the game. They educate themselves on divorce court, makes them not want to get married. They educate themselves on the financial system, makes them not even care about money. They educate themselves on whether you even need to go to college or not. So they say, you know what, I don't want to take on that kind of debt. So it's like they've gained so much wisdom that they no longer view the accomplishments as worth it. When people say the juice ain't worth the squeeze, that's what it means. It means they've gained the wisdom of understanding what it takes to accomplish that. And they've came to the conclusion that it's not worth it. And, you know, it's interesting to think of it this way, but we've seen this change. We've seen this take place right in front of our very own eyes. And it's not good. It's not something we enjoy. You know, something small and insignificant, like seeing McDonald's go from being like this building with the red roof and the yellow French fries all across it. You know, you probably forgot that those McDonald's existed. You know, it's a brick building with a red roof and yellow stripes on that look like French fries on the top. Now it looks like an AT&T. It looks like a Best Buy or something like that. You know, and everything has just changed. I know that's an insignificant thing, but just to show you that like what you remember from your childhood and what you see as an adult is completely different. There's a gym that I used to go to. At the time I was going to 3 different gyms, a commercial gym, the gym I want to talk about, it was like a bodybuilder gym, lifestyle gym, and another one was a hole-in-the-wall gym called the Pit, and my girlfriend at the time called it the Armpit. It was like a dirty old gym, but I liked all 3. They had their charm for different reasons. But anyways, the bodybuilding gym, every dude in there was like dude broed out to the core, and they wanted to be friends. Like I would talk to them, they would want to hang out. They would want to go grab a beer together. You know, we would shoot the shit, locker room talk about the women in the gym. Even if the dude was a total dork, the other guys would be like, hey dork, need some help lifting that? And then they would teach him how to get buff. And then they would see him looking at a girl and they'd be like, hey dork, why don't you go talk to her? You know, so even though he was the dork, he was a dork that was part of the group. He was still invited. He was still part of the family. And that's okay because different people have different personality types, right? And the women were not just wanting attention. It wasn't a thirst trap. They wanted you to approach them. And they wanted to hook up. They wanted to have fun. And you know, that was just the culture. You see these like funny videos like 30-year-old boomer at the gym. But they're true. That's how we were. That's how it was. And the boomers at the gym and the Gen Xers were very social too. They would openly tell you, we're not even here to work out. We're just here to talk. Okay. You just want to come here and shoot the shit with some young people and just enjoy yourself. Cool, whatever. They like doing that. But one day in the late 2010s, they had rebranded. And the policies were changing, the gym etiquette was changing. And by the way, I had dated a couple of the front desk girls there. You know, I had their phone numbers and social media. We would all hang out. We were just all people that would hang out, right? So that was my crew. It was my clique, you know. But after the policy changes took place, I noticed the girls working at the front desk were all quitting and being replaced with new workers. And by the time 2020 hit, and when the gyms opened back up, I realized all the people that I used to know from that gym were gone. And I was still going. And when I would drive there, I would envision the gym being the same as I remembered it. But when I would get there, it wasn't the same. I was no longer getting phone numbers, hooking up with the women and friends with the men. Now I was like getting reported for dropping the weights or something, like making noise or something. I thought there was something weird, something off about me, like if my social skills declined that much. But it took me a while to realize that the gym that I had been going to no longer existed. And that's why the people had quit. The people quit working there and quit going there. And now it was a different market of people, like this very corporate atmosphere, like a corporate business casual etiquette and kind of dress code too. It was no longer like dudes in stringer tees and girls and like sometimes women would have bikinis on because they would be bodybuilders and they'd be like posing and shit. They'd have like thongs on and stuff. But now it was like a very like corporate business casual, not just dress code, but code of conduct or etiquette, the way people talked. It was no longer real and raw. It was, hey, how are you? Hello, hope you had a good summer. See you next time. It wasn't real anymore. It was fake. Eventually, I just quit going to that gym. I found a new gym that was kind of more my taste. But what took place at that gym also took place in the real world in that same time period. The way that the boomers conducted themselves, and it was kind of a change of the guard, a passing of the torch. The boomers were no longer young enough to party. They were getting too old, And it was the Gen Xers that were the oldest people at the bar, the oldest people out socializing. And the millennials were now the leaders of the world, right? The supervisors, the managers, they were running the show. And the values of the boomers, the boomers that wanted to go out to the bar and talk. They just wanted to go out and socialize. Those values were gone. And now it's like, I don't know, just the attitude of the world has changed so much. So the average millennial guy, it's just like going to that gym. You go into your daily routine, and it probably struck you, and it felt depressing when you realized it. But there was a day that you realized that the way that the world functioned and the way that you still kind of yearn for it to function no longer exists. It's no longer a thing. And it's tough to deal with, right? Even something like video games. I was never much of a gamer, but I had a PlayStation when I was a teenager. And gaming was a very social activity. To game, it'd be a Friday night. You'd have some friends over, 4 or 5 friends, and your parents would let you put the PlayStation on the big TV in the living room, order some pizzas, and it'd be you and all your bros playing video games. No online shit. Now gaming is like, they just live stream with people. You're sitting in your computer room by yourself, live streaming with other people. And that's kind of how the world is functioning. That's what we're moving towards. And it's also been discouraged to have a nice, healthy social life and a family. Millennials, we sat back and watched it decline, and we had no clue that it was about to be destroyed. We were so busy listening to Korn and Limp Bizkit and Eminem and freaking Little John and the East Side Boys. Remember them? Yeah, you scared, motherfucker, you scared. That was us. We were drinking beer and listening to shit like that. Watching Beavis and Butthead and The Real World and Road Rules. Having no clue that everything was about to fall apart. And as we became adults, that life that we were promised was no longer going to exist by the time we were old enough to receive that promise. And our parents had no clue either. They trained us up to be just like them. They did a good job, but they had no clue how much it was going to change. And, here we are. But the reason why I say embrace mediocrity is because that's the only way we're going to solve the problem. If you look at the boomers, they were the most mediocre generation of them all. I don't think a man wants to have a tame office job, boring office job, and go home to his family and just be locked into that lifestyle. I think what a man wants is the freedom to go out and do whatever he wants. I do think it's wise to find yourself a wife and have kids with her. And you can accomplish that, you just have to play the game right. We also are the first generation to be able to, you can almost be like the Wolf of Wall Street on social media. You see guys cracking the code on social media very effortlessly, not even doing much work, becoming worth $100 million or so. We're the first generation that can do that. So we have opportunities to be exceptional. But society thrives when you have a large group of mediocre people working together, enjoying life, having a community. When you have this individual exceptionalism where everybody wants to be an individual, but everybody wants to somehow get rich, but it's all for their selfish reasons, it doesn't function properly. So I think that guy at Brahms kind of has the right idea. He is the archetype, or the epitome of the man. If men were all that way, I think we could go back to a somewhat normal way of living. But, it is what it is, right? Anyways, it's hard to make this point because it's not so much a point that I'm trying to make. Again, it's a concept. It's an idea, but it's an observation, all rolled into one. And bro, this is where we're at. Just enjoy it. Enjoy that mediocrity. Be that guy at Brahms and say, you know what, screw it. I don't, whatever, my job sucks. Whatever. I'm not living the life I want to live. Who cares? I'm just going to freaking enjoy it. Crack jokes with people when they walk by me. Live life, But moving forward, yeah, sure, we are cooked. We are cooked, but doesn't mean we can't enjoy it. All right, guys, I think I've rambled on enough. It's about time I go ahead and shut this one off, but I hope this video was somewhat informative to you. And that's about it for today, guys. Until next time, see ya.